Hey there, fuckers. We are here this morning to discuss the question: what is abuse in 2024? You may have noticed that the definition seems like it has changed in recent years. So let's talk about what the modern take on abuse is. So, the most basic definition is that abuse is to treat a person or animal with cruelty, violence, especially regularly or repeatedly. Here's the problem with that fucking definition: it depends on comprehension of those words and the chosen perspective of the person who's hearing them. For instance, what is cruelty? Well, in our culture, it's rather uncouth to admit that anyone has the personal characteristic of cruel. So we will hide it from ourselves and others. Cruel also implies an intention to enact harm, which is not necessary to be abusive. And what harms one person and therefore seems like a cruel behavior was used may not harm another person at all, making it difficult to even understand this first term. Similarly, we can look at the word violence. So, cultural ideals of what violence is and isn't are rather limited and extreme. It sort of implies a physical or material or bodily nature has to be necessary in order for abuse to be taking place. And of course, if we get to the words regularly or repeatedly, these are just poorly defined terms and colloquialisms. No one really knows what regularly or repeatedly is, except for their own personal definition. And overall, let us not forget that abuse is generationally defined based on the societal norms during each individual's upbringing, i.e., my mother made me pick my own switch. My father made me sleep outside when I didn't come home on time. And every husband beat his wife and children. What do you have to complain about? In fact, it seems necessary to point out that many abusers dedicatedly avoid repeating the abuse that they have encountered in their own history onto others. This allows them to rationalize that they aren't really being abusive because their experience is their only basis for understanding, quote, real abuse. So, the overarching problem with understanding abuse is no one is educated or accountable when our definition is open for so much individual interpretation, rationalizing, and misunderstanding. Here's a better definition in 2024: abuse is any attempt to control another person or animal rather than controlling one's self. Here's a still better definition: any attempt to control, as in alter the behavior of another person or animal without controlling, altering the behavior of one's self. How do you feel about that definition? Now, I think it's important that we use this because it still allows all the various channels of abuse to be mentioned and valid. Abuse can happen through many, many means, like retribution for prior offenses, vengeance, or to decrease the likelihood of a future behavior taking place again, punishment. It can also be dismissing the needs, preferences, or discomforts of others, neglect and dehumanization, and purposely acting against the needs, preferences, and discomforts of others, which we can call torment. And of course, All of these can include mental, emotional, and physical violence or intimidation. So, really, the trickiest part about abuse is it's not about what the abuser consciously intends. It's not about their own definition of abuse, their own tolerance for abuse, or the stories available to them to justify, explain, or rationalize their behaviors. The really tricky part about abuse is it's about the experience of the person who is being abused. Is their brain fully in their own control? They are consciously choosing their own adventure moment by moment. Or is someone imparting fear, self repression, behavioral, mental, emotional stress, which can cause the person to lose control of their own cognitive functioning and their own behaviors? And keep in mind that this can and does happen subconsciously, as in the brain automatically learns to adapt and to respond to punishment and reward in its environment. So even the abused may not be able to identify their abuse or their abuser. As you can see, defining and identifying abuse is very complicated for both of the people who are in it. This is why so many of us get stuck in abusive relationships unknowingly, get stuck in abusive relationships with some suspicion of the potential abuse. This is why so many of us are abusers unconsciously or are abusers with abuse hiding justifications that we fully believe ourselves. This is why so many of us become part of mutually abusive relationships unknowingly or become part of mutually abusive relationships in which our actions are justified by both parties' mutual abuses. This is also why so many of us are aghast parents in 2024, not understanding how our children consider us to be abusive. So, let's go through some examples using this simplified definition and try to clear things up. Abuse is any attempt to alter the behavior of another person or animal rather than altering the behavior of one's self. Example: Fred is very tired and hungry. He is at his wits' end, overwhelmed by the day he's had. His toddler is crying and slamming his toys around for attention. Fred cannot deal with this level of stimulation right now. Fred screams at his child to shut up and slams the door to demonstrate his frustration on the way out of the room. Is Fred being abusive? Yes. Here's why. Fred is tired and hungry. Fred is overwhelmed. These are the problems of Fred. The solutions are in the control of motherfucking Fred. Is his toddler responsible for any of these problems or potential resolutions? No. The abusive solution? Fred, quote, finds a reason for his unpleasant emotions and physical state, his toddler, who then must be fixed in order for Fred to feel okay again. The healthy solution is that Fred takes control of himself. He feeds himself, he rests, he removes himself from the stimulatory events and regrounds his nervous system, aware that only he, Fred, can help himself to feel better. He discusses his need for peace and rest with his toddler down the road, helping the child to understand this for the future. To take a step back, on a logical and relational level, the only realistic and effective solution in this set of circumstances is that Fred changes his behaviors to meet his needs rather than attempting to control another individual to lessen his immediate complaints and big old feelings. You with me? So, to bring this to a human level, why is it hard for Fred and all of us to take the healthy, non abusive route? Poor internal awareness. Fred does not listen to his body or interpret its messages. He uses his brain to reactively find problems instead. Poor emotional intelligence. Fred probably wholeheartedly believes that his feelings come from external events rather than identifying and taking ownership of or managing his own affect. And poor self care. A really important point in 2024. Fred is probably very stressed and very busy. He doesn't know that it's not selfish, but rather that he helps everyone by taking care of his needs before he becomes resentful and lashes out. Here's another example. Linda has relationship anxiety and low esteem. She loves her mate, Jim, but doubts that she is good enough for him. She worries nonstop that he's cheating on her. So Linda gets upset when Jim doesn't call her immediately after his work shifts. Jim insists he's just too overwhelmed and tired to do it every night and loves her dearly, but Linda still gets upset. Jim failed to call her last night. In response, Linda blocks him and will not answer her door, so Jim will understand what it is like to worry. Is Linda being abusive? Is Jim? Is Linda being abusive? Yes, regardless of Jim cheating or not. Is Jim being abusive? Only if he's lying about being too tired to call after work and something else is going on. Here's why. Linda has attachment issues and low esteem. Linda has described her wants to Jim, and Jim has stated that he cannot meet her expectations. Linda cannot continue to expect what Jim did not and cannot agree to deliver in the relationship. Punishing him with stonewalling for failing to meet an unagreed upon contract is an attempt to control Jim rather than Linda controlling Linda's own fears. And is Jim being abusive? Only if he's lying. Here's why. Jim has stated what he has to offer. Jim follows through on what he has stated he can provide, calling sometimes, but not always. Unless Jim is deceiving Linda and knowingly stimulating her relational distress by refusing to call when he says he will, Jim is doing exactly what he has promised. But even if Jim is a lying, cheating asshole, Linda is still being abusive. Linda's choice to take retaliatory action, punishing Jim with the silent treatment, is abusive, even if Jim was deceiving or cheating on her. She purposely willed harm against her partner in the attempt to control him in the future, again, rather than controlling her own esteem or attachment issues. So, let's say that Jim was cheating. Let's say he's also at fault, just to play this out completely. This is called mutual abuse. It means they're both abusing each other, and one abuse does not validate or negate the other because abuse is multi-directional and it often gets confusing like this. So, The abusive route for Linda is staying unhappily in a relationship that does not meet her needs and blaming her partner. Rather than seeking treatment for attachment and esteem issues, Linda makes them about Jim. Expecting Jim to comfort her and provide continual reassurance, Linda then seeks retribution whenever he fails her and hurts him purposely. What is the healthy route for Linda? Realizing that she has greater needs than her partner can meet, Linda could reconsider that this relationship is not for her. Attending therapy to improve her esteem and rehabilitate her insecure attachment, Linda could find peace through critical thinking and system re regulation. Linda could also find a better suited partner if Jim is, in fact, cheating on her. And for Jim, the abusive route, assuming that he's cheating, is to continue to deceive Linda and control her behaviors through ignoring her needs for communication. The healthy route for Jim would be to continue communicating about what he has to offer in the relationship and following through with his statements, allowing Linda to work it out herself. This is assuming he is not cheating or deceiving her. If she does not work on her attachment and esteem issues, then Jim would really benefit from exiting the relationship and being in one in which there is mutual trust. So, why is it so hard for Linda and all of us to take the healthy route? Relationship unaccountability. She was probably taught that relationship unhappiness is due to her partner, not her own behaviors or cognitive wellness. Self delusion. Linda chose her partner based on some idea of him, not the openly stated and demonstrated reality of Jim. Relationship fantasy. Linda probably believes that no one ever hurts again and compromise is not necessary in a good relationship. And we can also guess there might be some abuse tit for tat in her past. Perhaps Linda was taught that her abuse doesn't really count if she wholeheartedly believes she was done wrong first. Now, let's go through some really easy questions to simplify this difficult topic, and you can identify if you may be in an abusive relationship on either end of it. Do you live driven by fear? Do you behave in ways that are not native to your system? In other words, your behaviors originate from external factors and pressures pushing on you. Are there one sided rules of conduct in your relationship? Do you regularly direct your mind to the wants, needs, thoughts, feelings of someone else in order to feel safe or, quote, keep the peace? And the potential abuse answers are indicated here in red. Next set of questions. Are you able to live without second guessing your actions? Can you speak your experience and have productive conversation about it? Do you feel like an equal in your relationship or relationships? When you name your needs and preferences, does anything change or are they later used against you? And here again, the potential abuse answers are indicated in red. Switching gears. When something is wrong, do you investigate what's happening within you before reacting? Does your environment create your moods and behaviors? Do you believe that life would be easier if the people around you just acted the way you need them to? Are there good reasons for every action you make, slash, you would behave differently if others would? Well, the you may potentially be enacting abuse answers are indicated here in red. I know this is a hard conversation and a controversial take on the subject, but does it make some sense of your abuse experiences using this definition? Pop your cues and concerns in the comments, and we can continue discussing as much as necessary. That includes if you completely disagree with me. I'm here for it. And that is Understanding Abuse in 2024. Ask and receive more clarifying statements and examples as needed. But can we say that abuse is attempting to control the behaviors of other people and animals rather than controlling the behaviors of one's self? Let me know what you think. Thanks for stopping by. Hail yourself. Hail Archie and Marcus Sparks. And I'll talk to you real soon. Cheers, y'all. Bye bye.